Next speaker is Professor Clayton, Phil Clayton. He's famous on religious philosophy and philosophy of science. We Chinese professor invite Professor Clayton visit China many times. Also, he visited my university, gave a lecture. Yeah, many times, yes. Now, welcome, please.
We're taking seat. Well, now you're visiting my university, so we're equal. Our hosts have urged us to, quote, highlight Whitehead's interdisciplinary and global impact. And there's probably no more wildly interdisciplinary topic than one can find in Whitehead's opus than his philosophy of civilization. But here's the problem. Many of us use the expression ecological civilization so frequently and so glibly that we rarely stop to think what we mean by civilization. And many, if not most, environmentalists use the term civilization in a mostly negative sense, such that ecological civilization is seen as a contradiction in terms. Having led the Institute for Ecological Civilization the last 10 years, I'll say that's a problem in fundraising, if nothing else. This is a weakness we must overcome if the goal of achieving an ecological civilization is going to draw leaders and guide policies. Both words need to be clear, attractive, and persuasive. The term ecological already plays these positive roles. The concept of civilization does not yet. Today, I'll suggest that Whitehead's work can help rectify this problem. Whitehead's philosophy of civilization is spread across his entire opus. To grasp it, you need to understand his philosophy of history, his philosophy of culture, his aesthetics, his social and political philosophy, and his theory of education, but also his metaphysics and his theory of religion. What makes it particularly difficult to grasp Whitehead's theory of civilization is that he makes little reference to the great theorists of civilization, Edward Gibbon, Oswald Spengler, Arnold Toynbee, Albert Schweitzer, Jared Diamond, and others. What Whitehead does offer, however, is a crucial corrective to the usual ways of talking about ecological civilization. My argument proceeds in 6 steps. 1, Whitehead doesn't define civilization by ideas or artifacts, nor does cultural anthropology play a major role in his work. Instead, 5 concepts form the heart of his theory. Listen, truth, beauty, adventure, art, and peace. Reflect with me. What would it mean to conceive civilization through these 5 nouns? My thesis is they shift the idea of civilization from a static, universal concept to a dynamic set of value ideals. The fusion of aesthetics and value, this is a talk made for you, Andrew, of aesthetics and values in Whitehead identifies a genre that's crucial for interpreting Whitehead's philosophy of civilization. The genre, I would say, of Lebensphilosophie, so philosophy of life. Wang Zhehe and Fan Meijun captured this insight in their Claremont Eco Forum a few years ago by shifting the focus from abstract principles of environmentalism to the task of forming eco-persons. The Eco Forum, I still remember, Zhehe, as if it was yesterday. In other words, an ecological civilization, when interpreted through Whitehead, relies on a life philosophy, namely a distinctively ecological mode of being in the world. Second, to get a sense of the philosophy of life Whitehead has in mind, consider these 5 terms. Taken together, they convey what it is to live a civilized life. So, adventure is forward-looking, not rooted in the past. It involves novelty, change, and innovation, but also risk. A society, quote, preserves its vigor so long as it is nerved by the vigor to adventure beyond the safeties of the past. Adventures of ideas. Peace, for Whitehead is not the absence of conflict. It refers to the balance or harmony of fundamental forces. Deeper peace stems from the dedication to beauty, a transcendence of inner and outer conflict, and the transition from narrow selfishness to a love of humanity as such. By truth, Whitehead means not the possession of final certainty, but devotion to the process. A devotion that depends not only on personal commitment, but also on social structures, educational institutions, and the civic virtues that promote the quest for truth. Beauty for Whitehead is the fit of motivations, actions, and results into a broader harmonious whole. And finally, the brilliance of art, according to Whitehead, lies in its ability to turn the abstract into the concrete and the concrete into the abstract. This centrality of beauty and art is what I want to focus on. It suggests that Whitehead's is an aesthetic theory of civilization. That's not even a category in most of the, Spengler or Toynbee or whatever. Art, listen, art is an external expression of an aesthetic mindset. It draws us into a deep perceptive relationship with our surroundings. In Whitehead's aesthetic, the artist seeks to create beauty in ways that increase the value and quality of life. Artistic creations, in their combination of novelty and discipline, express emotions and insights in ways that are both time-bound and timeless. Whitehead didn't publish a separate book on his philosophy of art, but what emerges across his opus is an understanding of art that is grounded in values, beauty, and a metaphysics of process. Art expresses an inherent aesthetic order, or maybe we should say lure, that moves from potential to actual in the flow of actual occasions across universal history. In Whitehead's metaphysics of, shall we say it, aesthetic axiological interconnectedness, every experience is an aesthetic experience. Each one is characterized by unity, beauty, and value. Well, clearly, this is a radically different frame for our theory of civilization. Traditionally, civilization is associated with kingdoms and large cities and the religions of the book. Yet none of these is essential here. Indigenous life ways are civilized on this view. Indeed, more civilized than the late modern consumerist lifestyle. For a civilized person is one whose life is devoted to the value ideals of adventure, peace, truth, beauty, and art. Can you hear the radicalness of this vision of communities of civilized persons who manifest these 5 qualities? Peace is a state of calmness and harmony for an individual, but the state can also be manifested within a community, between communities, between nations, or in the connection between humans and their natural environment. Truth is a relationship of the mind to the nature of things, but it's not about the mind alone. It encompasses the deeper fit or coherence between persons, their lifestyles, and the surrounding reality. Given that all is in process, truth cannot be a fixed mindset or a static set of beliefs. Instead, listen, it's a continual reharmonizing of thought and action within an ever-changing world. Adventure is an experience of the whole person who welcomes novelty and change with zest. Quite his word. Yet the spirit of adventure is expressed not just in individuals, but in organizations, communities, and even in the spirit of an age. And finally, beauty is apprehended through the aesthetic sense and it encompasses every dimension of human experience. Beauty is lived out in life as art, in the lives of individuals, communities, societies, religions, and cultures. Fourth, unfortunately, I have to skip the section on the metaphysical foundations of Whitehead's theory of civilization, which is fascinating and I think profound. At least it gave me a new reading on Whitehead. So I'll summarize the conclusions of my longest section with a single sentence from J.R. Hustwit. For Whitehead, quote, art is fundamental to the cosmos. The very fabric of reality is an artistic process. Today, I think there's only time to consider the implications for education before closing. So for Whitehead, the function of education is the formation of civilized persons in the sense that I've described it so far, not in the sense that you were expecting. Forming a civilized person requires an educational system that supports creativity, independent thinking, and values-based reflection. That process moves, as you know, through romance, falling in love with a topic or area of study, then precision, and then generalization. Such formation goes far deeper than inculcating some particular set of facts or values in the poor suffering student. Instead, it equips people to think and act both critically and axiologically. In fact, that's inseparable for Whitehead. A.H. Johnson, in his book on Whitehead's philosophy of civilization, describes the deeply personal nature of forming civilized persons. I love this quote. Quote, when a young person has succumbed to the lure of beauty, felt it intimately, immersed herself in the depths of aesthetic experience, then, unmindful of the narrow self, she will have a vision of peace, the harmonization of activities directed toward ideal aims. Conclusion. So how does Whitehead's view of civilization transform the term ecological civilization? I hope you're intuiting that it will, right? That it will look nothing like much of the discourse that my organization and many of the scholars in this field treat it. Okay, adding the term ecologically asks us to apply the way of being in the world that Whitehead advocates to a specific context, a set of challenges, and an underlying cause. Say it again. Adding the term ecological to civilization asks us to apply the way of being in the world that I've been describing to a specific context, challenges, and underlying cause. The context is global climate destruction caused by one species living beyond the carrying capacities of the planet. The challenge is how to mitigate the disastrous effects of human exceptionalism and how to adapt to a planet whose entire biosphere is on the edge of collapse. The underlying cause is that humans view the resources of nature as commodities to be extracted without limit in order to maximize economic gain and to satisfy our apparently unlimited desire for increased comfort and pleasure. That is, unfortunately, the context to which we're applying this notion of the civilized life. For Whitehead, civilized represents a novel way of being in the world that involves the complete transformation of the individual. This transformation is impossible without an entire community that helps form and support such persons. And they, in turn, form communities that live by those values. So it's not an individualism. It's a dynamic of individual and communities of various sorts. Civilized living, again, the mixture of truth, beauty, adventure, art, and peace. Civilized living manifests in a family, a school, a community, a village, a region, in religious or spiritual practices, in a culture, in the spirit of an age or an epoch. Indeed, it manifests finally in a planetary way of being with those 5 qualities. In sum, We too often speak of ecological civilization as a thing, a product, a distillate. But no, it's a living, breathing way of being in the world, fresh every morning. It can't be reduced to doctrines or equations. Learning to live in this civilized way means fanning a fragile, tiny flame. What Emily Dickinson writes of hope applies equally to being civilized ecologically. It is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Thank you very much.